And so obviously, even if they try to reshape it, because for example they want to look the same in the same mold as mud, it will not really look the same in the end. And starts being more and more sort of, we all want more or less virtually the same thing for at least that class and for that occasion. And so they start making things which are more made to be made like so, if that makes sense. The further one goes back, if one goes back to antiquity, literally clothing, or even in the Middle Ages until the 13th century, and way beyond for the most people, but until the 13th century for at least nobility and royals, things were just meant to last as long as possible, and just to clothe people, to protect them from the elements, to still mark them in society, but it was not fashion, it was not contouring the body, it was just like blankets, like tunics, with practically blankets that could fit almost anyone. And if it no longer fitted it, if it is well meant initially for somebody like me, you can make it wide up to a certain point. And then the only person I have to give it to is a very fat person. It will not be very comfortable. You could still just resew, imagine that as a tunic, you could just resew that part to another part. And step by step to have fashion which starts being fitted garments, and then the garments start being padded in, I think, even to some extent in the 13th century, and they start adding more padding, and so things start becoming just to be that precise thing, if that makes sense. And still they were remakeable, reshapeable to some extent, and the more one advances, the more it starts being unremakeable, unreshapeable. And some people do still try to remake them. There are many people, my mother says, that her grandmother, so my great-grandmother that I knew, the one that looked like the same color as Michael Jackson, she would take coats like that, like padded coats. This is from, again, the early 20th century. And she would add a piece, like open them and add a piece in the bind to make them larger. You can always do anything you want, but it will not fit properly, it will not look nice. Ideally, you should not make that. It will simply be a waste of time and damaging something. And the same thing for the hat. You could always, some people have tried to reshape those hats, make them into another shape. It is minimally policeable, as in you can change it a little bit, or even I want to say a minimalistically bit. But that is all. And also every time, the more you want to change it, especially the crown, the more you take the risk of ruining the hat completely, because it has to be dealt with warm chemicals, and I mean literally it would melt. Like it would melt the gossamer and all, and it would not even if you wanted to look like Charlie Chaplin or not mind looking like a tramp, you would not just be able to, you would simply be able to put like a crown on your, like a brim, with a completely collapsed crown, or that starts detaching itself. I mean, it would not even be a hat anymore, it would be just a brim with some weird thing still more or less dangling onto it. It would not just be a crushed hat, it would not just be like if I banged it just now, it would be way worse, it might do that. So really they were not really meant to be reshaped, nor they can be repaired, but often they were not even repaired as my fancy, for many reasons again. A hat like that, it would have cost less. Whatever it is you put on top, a felt hat is more expensive. Especially if you wanted to last a long time and to be denser and more protective, you would have to use a fair felt. There are countless different types. You could, once in France, I was visiting a hat maker, a modern hat maker, and I touched a Fidela. Just touched it, and I thought, damn, this is felt, but from a wool, from like a merino, very